Some people in the church may not necessarily appreciate cultural differences in the
Mm,
in the way that we worship. Because sometimes people come to a thing of like, oh, it has to be about reverence, and it's like, there's reverence, but it can be a reverent, appropriate, worship. Like, sometimes drums and a bass aren't going to work in every church because the people don't know what they're doing. But like growing up, I felt very reverent in my church. We always had drums and a bass and an organ and a piano, like in a large choir. So it all depends. But things, that's the beauty of the church. We kind of have the same liturgy, but the liturgy gives you enough room to incorporate cultural differences. And so you may attend the same mass, but the liturgy may be slightly different, and so we may see something in Africa or South America that is still reverent, but it's different from what we experience. So we still have kind of a European centric thought of reverence. So you can be reverent in different ways.
Hello and welcome to the Black Catholic Messenger Show, where we keep it Black and we keep it Catholic. I'm Nate Tenor Williams, and our guest today is Chris Ellis, a cradle Catholic from D.C. who is now in formation for the permanent diaconate in the Diocese of Trenton. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's great to have you with us, and I'm very excited to talk to someone who is in formation to fulfill their vocation. So I'm wondering if you could first, though, tell me a little bit about your background and your childhood parish in DC.
Yeah, so my childhood parish, I grew up at Holy Comforter St. Cyprian, East Capitol Street, Southeast DC, as my kind of the parish that I grew up in. And so I became very involved as youth in the parish. Did the youth choir. I was an altar server. I was in the youth group. I lectured a lot, and so I always felt a calling to do something. And over the years as an altar server being so involved, many people thought I was going to be a priest, but I just knew that that was never my calling. And even when I was invited to the come and sees, I never went because I didn't want to be a priest. I didn't feel that was my calling. And so after leaving DC to go to college, I attended St. John's University, involved in campus ministry there. I still felt that there was, something more that I wanted to do in the church, and I kind of started looking at the permanent diaconate. Living in New Jersey, different areas of New Jersey, I was checking out the diocese of where I lived and what the requirements were. But I couldn't do anything until I was in my 30s, and I would because you can't be ordained before you're 35 in most of the diocese for the permanent diaconate. So I got I met my wife in college. We got married shortly after. I finished law school. She finished her master's. We had some kids, and it was just something all the ways in the back of my head. And eventually, in the pandemic, kind of it was the time I could start, and I kind of looked at it, and I talked to my pastor about it, and he supported it. And I applied, and I started a program in Trenton. And so here we are, 4 years later. I'm just completed my master's through Seton Hall, so my commencement is next week. And then it's kind of just a lot of kind of practical training for the summer and fall until ordination in November.
So you started your seminary formation during the pandemic, is that right?
Yeah, towards the end of the pandemic,
What was
like
that like?
2022. It wasn't bad. Our the way that our diocese does it, the courses are through Seton Hall. but we actually take all of our courses at the diocese chancery building. So there's 10 of us in my class. So either a professor will come down from Seton Hall, or a priest in the diocese is an adjunct at Seton Hall, and they have their STL, STD, or their masters, and they're qualified to teach. And then they teach us. So everything's at chancery. So it's always been like the same 10 of us in the room. So it wasn't really bad. We started at towards the end of the pandemic. Things were starting to open up. So really we were able to go to class. It was really just wearing a mask for the first semester or two. And then after that, kind of Seton Hall dropped the mask mandate, and it's been like going back to school like normal.
What has that been like going back to school?
Yeah, it was a little rough, especially I have when I started, we had two young daughters, and just recently, we had one more in the last year. So it was an adjustment, taking classes at night twice a week. There's definitely a kind of like toll on the family. I have to give my wife a lot of props and thanks, and but for the grace of God, we got through this. I'm one of the youngest. I think I am the youngest in my group, and I'm the one with the youngest children. So it is definitely it can be a struggle at times, and I think we all felt it at times. At least you're away from your family twice a week at night, and then you're reading, you're writing papers, you're preparing for class, and a lot of us have been out of the classroom for a number of years. So it is an adjustment period to get back into kind of like that high level academic writing. You haven't done it in years, and I'm a lawyer, and I still doing working full time and doing my schoolwork. That's a lot. You got tired. Luckily, towards the end, got a little bit easier, but definitely in the beginning there was an adjustment period, to say the least.
Yeah, I can imagine. I was actually in seminary formerly. I think I probably started around the same time as you. And yeah, going back to school for me it was a very dreadful thought, but in the end it wasn't so bad. School can be fun, especially if you're studying something interesting like the faith, theology, philosophy in my case. But yeah, you mentioned your wife, and that sparked a thought in my head. If I understand correctly, when a man wants to become a permanent diaconate, his wife has to like consent to that in order for him to be
She,
allowed, right?
she has to agree. She has to be supportive. She has to. I think she had to actually write at least one letter, maybe two,
Mm.
um, saying that she understood, she supported this. It's very formal. They tell you exactly what to write, but you have to write it by hand and sign it. We both had to do some stuff, and even throughout the entire formation process, and even post ordination, they always tell you that your priorities are God, family, work, and then what you're doing in the church. Since we have full-time jobs, since we have families, our first priority can't always be our vocational work in the church, because we have other vocations. We have a vocation to marriage, and that's going to take precedence over what we're going to do in the church. And they tell us sometimes you're going to have to learn how to say no to certain things. You're not going to be able to do certain things, but you have to keep those priorities in line. Um, so yeah, so my wife is very happy that this is at least the academic part is ending, but there'll probably be new things that come up that we'll have to work through as well.
Yeah, I can imagine. Um, you mentioned the work aspect as well. Are you still a practicing lawyer? I don't know how that works when
Ye-
someone gets ordained.
yeah. We are you basically the diaconate is almost like a volunteer position. We don't get paid. We're doing this kind of like answering God's call. So we still have to support ourselves, and like unless you have some actual position in the church, yeah, we're all working full time. At least definitely in my class, everybody is still working. Some people do this closer to retirement. I know some people are older and closer to retirement, but we're all working full-time jobs. There's two other lawyers in the class. There are teachers, IT professionals. So we social workers. So we're kind of a diverse group. The class ahead of me had lawyers, doctors. The class behind me, same thing, lawyers. A lot of lawyers, but it's yeah, we all work, and so you balance the work, family life, and your academics.
Only like the Catholic Avengers.
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little bit more about what inspired you to pursue the diaconate? I know you kind of mentioned it in brief, but given your being a cradle Catholic and always thinking about this thing, what was that moment where you said, I'm going to do this despite the sacrifices?
Yeah, I was always involved in the church, and so I guess I never felt comfortable being kind of just sitting in the pews and kind of the lay participation in mass, which is fruitful in itself, definitely. But I've always had felt a calling to be more active, and so in our current parish, I got involved in teaching Sunday school, and slowly, I'd always thought since graduating college, what can I do in the church? And so even then, I had to be patient with myself because I know I was getting married or building a family. That's something I couldn't jump into the age requirement, but I just kind of had a feeling coming out of college, that there was something more I was called to do, beyond generally what a lay person will participate in mass, even as a lector and an extraordinary minister. Um, and I kind of felt that call to be a deacon, and so I, knew there was an age requirement. I knew I wanted to get married before I did it, and so we started a family. It's always something I had looked into, and it kind of kept in the back of my mind. And when the opportunity presented itself, and I spoke to my wife about it, and she supported it, we started the process.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, that's really inspiring. I think um, that process of discernment that people go through when deciding how to pursue their vocation is so important. I think, especially in the Black Catholic community, because it's not something that's talked about as much and it's not something that's acted on as much. And I think that's one of the reasons you don't see as many vocations to the priesthood, the diaconate, religious life in our community. So yeah, that's so important. It's important to hear stories of people going through that process and saying yes and following through on that.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think, and I mean, I had good examples growing up. I grew up in a predominantly African American parish, and so our pastor for a number of years was Black. The parochial vicar there, he was a parochial vicar when I was growing up. He's a pastor there now. He's not Black, but he kind of like learned a lot about the Black community. The deacons there were Black, and even the one of the deacons that I had a good relationship with, he came up and he performed. He witnessed our marriage. Um,
mm,
so, and he was very supportive of this process. He unfortunately passed away as I was starting the process, but it was definitely a lot of support and a lot of good examples for that. And I know it can be hard as an African American, especially in the United States. We're a minority in the church and not just the country, so it can be difficult to kind of see yourselves in there. But sometimes you have to answer the call in the midst of the difficulties as well. Because at the end
Amen.
of the day, it's a we are a big church, and the goal is salvation. So you got to listen to that call.
Absolutely. I'm curious, when you were growing up at Holy Comfort of St. Cyprian, were the Josephites still there?
No, I don't think they were never there when I was there. I
Okay.
do remember we there were still a few oblate sisters of Providence around.
Ah,
So potentially when my family, and at least my grandfather's side of the family has been part of that church for a long time, when it was still split between St. Cyprian and Holy Comforter before
mm,
the merger. But by the time, I was there was no really Josephites at Holy Comforter. So I don't have a lot of experience with Josephites. Interesting, just a lot of kind of more, I guess, the secular priests.
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, I was just curious. I don't even know when the Josephites left there, but I do remember from when I lived in DC that I learned that the Josephites were, I guess, a legacy religious community there at some point. I want to
Mhm.
say right after the merger, but I don't know the details. But yeah, just I was
Yeah,
curious.
I
Can you
do
tell me a little bit?
believe.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I do believe. I was confirmed by Bishop Olivier,
Ah,
and I do believe he might have been a Josephite. If not, he might have been
Divine Word, I think.
Divine Word. So maybe it was Divine Word. Okay, he was Divine Word. Yeah, but
Was he was auxiliary bishop of Washington,
yeah,
if
he
I
was
remember?
auxiliary bishop of Washington at the time. Him and Bishop Holly. So I was confirmed by Bishop Olivier.
Ah,
Bishop Holly confirmed my brother and some other people. So,
I see. Very
yeah.
interesting. Can you tell me a bit about the parish you're at now in New Jersey?
Yeah, my current parish, Holy Innocents in Neptune, New Jersey. So it's actually a parish that my wife grew up in.
Hmm.
She went to their school, and so this is where we kind of came after college, when we were dating, when we were engaged. We took I guess after we got married and we moved further north, we attended a different parish for a little while. And then once we moved back down here, and back to Monmouth County, New Jersey, this has kind of been our home parish since. So it's kind of nice, more of a modern structure parish. So it's a little different than what I was used to growing up in DC, the traditional kind of Latin cross architecture,
Hmm.
high ceilings, and everything else. And this is more of a more modern small church, but it is a large faith community, and it's a very welcoming faith community as well. So down here at the Jersey Shore.
Oh, Jersey Shore.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Is it like a heavily Italian parish? That's the only thing I know about Jersey Shore.
Uh, no, I mean, we're probably like 30 minutes north of where Jersey Shore was took place. So like we're the more north of the shore, beginning of the shore.
Okay.
Um, it is a I'm not sure. It's Italian, Irish, Filipino,
Hmm.
a few African Americans, Haitian Americans, actual African immigrants. So it's a kind of mixed parish. It's still a largely, I, I guess, European centric kind of parish, but
Hmm.
definitely a large Filipino population. But and then every once in a while, sometimes you get more people. Um, there is a kind of a large Haitian American community near us, but there's a other churches in the area that some will come to, but some do come to us as well. But we're seeing how kind of all the parishes still work out as they combine and close different areas,
Hmm.
as they kind of put us in different cohorts. So we're trying to see how it is. There are a lot of parishes in Monmouth County. They're probably like 5 minutes away from me, so they're not necessarily all big, because they were a lot of built community parishes. Um, And that's just how our county shaped out. So with attendance declining, all our parishes aren't full. But I mean, we still, I think, get about 800 people a week attending mass.
And you expect to be assigned to Holy Innocents? I don't know how that process
Yeah,
works.
yeah. I expect to be assigned to Holy Innocents. So I think that there's always the possibility that the bishop can choose to move you, but with permanent deacons, they the bishop maybe has just been a little more conscious that, like, if he moves you, maybe a different conversation, or a parish that's so close to you, you still work at family, you're not going to uproot your life and move kind of like an hour away to another parish. And like if a priest is reassigned from one parish to another, because we're not living at the parishes. So, but definitely. And then the way our diocese does it, the parish did cover a portion of my fees to Seton Hall. So to kind of like do that and then move me somewhere else would not be fair to the parish, as well as that, they did fund a part of my education.
Wow. So could you tell me a little bit more about your experience at Seton Hall, your theology studies? I assume you got a Master's of Divinity. Is that correct?
No, so I got a master's of theology. So focused in systematic theology. They, with feedback, they may be changing the program to kind of give it a more pastoral focus. Being the deacon is kind of supposed to, kind of really be with the people. Since we live and work in the secular world, we're supposed to be able to kind of be part of that bridge, and so it may be more of a pastoral focus coming up. But some of the same classes. So a lot of the standard classes: Old Testament, New Testament, John and Paul. But also we focus on ethics, the morals, because we would have to be able to explain to people who may seek guidance from us what the what the faith teaches in certain areas. Sacraments, because we are going to be performing baptisms and witnessing marriages at the least. And also, so it's been 4 years, 2 semesters, a class, and then we also, Christology, Trinity, Christian anthropology. So really learning about you as a person from the Christian perspective, and learning about the mystery of God, and being able to, preach and teach on these things. And the professors really try to gear it so the assignments you're doing kind of work for real world application. So, there were papers, but we also were preparing and delivering homilies. We were preparing presentations, like if we were giving a talk at the church, and we would have to do it for kind of different ages. Like if we were giving the talk to younger kids, if we were doing teens, if we were doing adults, like how we kind of gear that kind of presentation to those people. So they try to really make it practical. So we were building skills that would help us in our vocation.
I see. Was anything in your studies new to you that you hadn't really encountered in your Catholic life thus far?
Probably, we had to go through canon law, so you may know some stuff, but you never necessarily go through canon law unless you really have to. So canon law applies to kind of deacons or overview, and then things that relate to marriage preparation, sacramental preparation. Revelation and faith was kind of interesting and difficult, going through the various forms of theological and philosophical discussions on the revelation of God throughout the centuries, and how people kind of like viewed it, and then ultimately getting to kind of like the final, how we kind of like settled on viewing revelation and faith. And so a lot of it you might have known, but you kind of got a different or deeper understanding of some of it. And some things were definitely new. And, even, growing up, Catholic and attending, Sunday school and going to St. John's and taking theology and philosophy classes there, there's still some new things that I learned over the last 4 years, as well. And I'm like buried in different books, and I'm still reading to help me continue to kind of learn and be a good deacon.
Incredible. So what is the role of a permanent deacon based on what you've learned and what you felt called you to the vocation in the first place? What
Yeah.
do you do?
So, I mean, I guess the main thing that people are going to see is that, what a deacon does during the Mass and assisting with the Mass. The deacon has specific roles in the Mass. During the penitential rite, you may do the tropes. During the Eucharist, liturgy of the Eucharist, the deacon helps prepare the altar. The deacon raises the chalice, mixes the water and the wine, and those have certain spiritual and theological aspects. Mixing the water and the wine, it's kind of like mixing the sacred with the profane, and it's how the deacon goes out into the secular world and is supposed to bring the sacredness to the secular world, and raising the chalice while the priest is raising the host kind of gives you an image of the crucifixion. You have the deacon and the priest are being in persona Christi, and then the priest is representing Christ the priest, and the deacon is representing Christ the servant who died for us. So there's certain theological aspects that you don't really think about or know about unless you study them. The deacon dismisses the people at the end of the Mass and sends them to go forth, because once again, the deacon is supposed to be that bridge between the sacred and the world, and it's like go out and evangelize. So that's generally what you see a deacon do. But then after that, it's kind of like what the priest may want you to do, what you may want to take on. So, you could be involved in marriage prep, funeral prep. You can witness marriages. You'll probably be on like the schedule for baptisms and adoration and benediction. So it depends on the parish. So there are various things you can do as an ordained deacon. So it's kind of like how much you want to get involved in it, and kind of like what the priests would like you to do outside of the role at the Mass. Because, honestly, as a deacon, we shouldn't just be showing up at Mass. We should be doing other things in the parish too. So, how active do you want to be?
What are some of the things you're involved in at your parish?
So right now I teach Sunday school. And so as this goes for, I lectured some, a Eucharist minister. I was taking Eucharist, I was taking communion to the sick when needed. And so I'm hoping go forward. I may want to, do kind of like a marriage ministry. And you may want to get more involved in the kind of the Bible studies that my parish runs, and kind of see what it takes me from there. At the same time, knowing that I have a wife and family that I have to balance at the same time. So I want to make sure I kind of slowly take on things that's not going to kind of like hinder my marriage or my responsibilities as a father.
Sure, absolutely. Do you mind if I ask how old you are?
Yeah, I'm 37.
Wow. And you said deacons have to be 35 at minimum?
35 at ordination, I think is the rule. I think that's what the rule in our diocese is. 35 at ordination. You may be able to go lower, but I think we're 35.
So you're going to be one of the younger deacons in the country.
Yeah, I'll be around for a while. That was the other thing. I didn't want to join it. Some people do it as like kind of like, all right, it's my second job, or it's like it's post retirement. It's a little older. I can see that it would be definitely easier to have gone through this process with older children who are much more self-sufficient. but sometimes you just when you have a call, you answer the call, and this gives me, God willing, a lot more time to fulfill this vocation.
And now they get to grow up with a deacon dad.
I know, that'd be interesting. See how it goes.
I was a pastor's kid growing up. I grew up
Mhm.
Baptist and some other denominations, but yeah, it's always a fun experience when your parent is an ordained minister.
Yeah,
Um,
everybody knows you.
yeah, yeah, no kidding, no pressure. um, I have a question about Black vocations. How do you think the Catholic Church can inspire more Black men and women to pursue vocations in ordained ministry and consecrated life?
Yeah, I think it. It's really, have to support all vocations, and I think our vocation director kind of says it's not necessarily that people don't want to be priests, that people don't want to be deacons, people don't want to be religious. It's sometimes when they express this desire, this call, sometimes it's the family that says, no, I don't want to lose you to the church, I want grandkids, I want
Mm,
this. So it can be that. And I remember seeing an article on the Black Catholic Messenger before, from somebody that says they wouldn't really want their children to become priests, because of some of the still racial issues that we had. But I think that's kind of the reason that you really want to get a more diverse kind of clergy, especially in the United States. We're a big church, and like honestly, we're becoming a more Southern Hemisphere church.
yeah.
There's going to be a lot more Asian and African and South American leadership in the church, and I think it's just part of being historically in the United States of the church. And the you know Catholics were persecuted for a while in the church, and then you have African Americans that persecuted while just in general, but it's kind of like really getting there and supporting it. And I think some of it is um, we some people in the church may not necessarily appreciate cultural differences
Mm,
in the way that we worship, because sometimes people come to a thing of like, oh, it has to be about reverence, and it's like, there's reverence, but it can be a reverent, appropriate worship ceremony. Like, sometimes drums and a bass aren't going to work in every church because the people don't know what they're doing. But like growing up, I felt very reverent in my church Holy Comforter. We always had drums and a bass and an organ and a piano, like in a large choir. So it all depends. But things are going to be, that's the beauty of the church. We kind of have the same liturgy, but the liturgy gives you enough room to incorporate cultural differences. And so you may attend the same mass, but the liturgy may be slightly different. And so we may see something in Africa or South America that is, it's still reverent, but it's different than from what we experience. So we still have kind of a European centric thought of reverence. So I think the more that people recognize that you can be reverent in different ways, but you also have a lot of options to kind of like find a church that kind of may meet your spiritual needs, which we really shouldn't be church shopping. You should really be able to go to any church and do it. And some people like, I need the church community, but you really just need that worship experience. And if you kind of like how the liturgy goes, that's great. But that's not necessarily like our focus. But it is nice to have that. But the more that we become accepting of different ways of kind of worship and supporting that, and I think everybody has to get out of their comfort zone sometimes and kind of go to a different kind of worship area and kind of see how that goes, because we're all in the same church, we're all for the same faith, we're fighting the same fight. So we shouldn't really be, fighting against each other over something. Now, there's definitely some things should not be happening at masses, for sure. But if it ain't breaking the rubric, if we have a valid mass, things should be acceptable.
I absolutely agree. I think that's been I would say it's been one of the great legacies of now the late Pope Francis, is to encourage us to be more open on these sorts of things, to understand the diversity of the church, the diversity of the mass, the different things that are possible there. And so I want to ask you about that. How have you received the legacy of Pope Francis, on any topic as you pursued your vocation to the diaconate?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think what I've kind of taken from Pope Francis is kind of the spirit of being a welcoming church and really reflecting the mercy of Christ and the welcoming nature of Christ. I mean, we make no mistake, we are obligated to preach the truth and to call out things that are wrong when they come up, but there is still we do it pastorally, we do it with mercy, we do it with love, and we still kind of accept and welcome everybody by the mere fact that they're made in the image and likeness of God. And that's kind of like where a lot of our faith and human dignity stems from. It's like everybody's made in the image and likeness of God, and so no matter what they do, the part of God exists in them, and we should treat them as such. You still have to instruct properly, and you have to call out wrongs, but we don't preach hate, and we don't want to preach separation.
Absolutely. That's beautiful. So, when exactly is your ordination?
November 15th is the date.
November 15th. That's Black Catholic History Month now.
Oh, is it?
Yes, indeed. And it's going to be a cathedral in Trenton. Is that right?
No. So right now we're scheduled to be at our co-cathedral in Freehold. So they had
Diocese
to.
of Trenton has a co-cathedral?
We have a co-cathedral. Our diocese, I think, we cover at least 3 counties: Monmouth, Ocean, and Mercer counties. Trenton is, if you look at New Jersey, it's very far west in New Jersey, close to Philadelphia, and we cover all the way. So we can get there. It takes an hour, but sometimes we do things in our co-cathedral. So our Chrism Mass will happen at co-cathedral. It's kind of like more central for that. And I think just in this place, our cathedral may not have been available on the date because our bishop, he kind of moved up our ordination. And so we were picking a date. Well, he picked the date, and so they had to figure out what was available. So the cathedral may not have been available that day. So we're doing the co-cathedral.
I've never heard of a co-cathedral that was in a different city than the seat of the diocese, but the diocese doesn't have 2 seats.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, when I learned we had a co-cathedral, I had to look it up. It's interesting.
So it should be the Diocese of Trenton Freehold.
No, but
well, you know more about canon than me, so I can't say how that's supposed to work. But I want to ask this: how should the people listening, people reading BCM, be praying for you in the coming months?
Any way they can.
Good answer.
I try to say, that it's very, very hard to pray wrong. There's 10 of us in my class, and another gentleman, he's Haitian American, but I appreciate all the prayers for everybody that is going through the vocation process, our priests, our deacons, our candidates in it, even in our religious, and just pray for more vocations and more, not only kind of like conversion, to the faith, but also, a deeper understanding of the faithful that we have now as well. I think the more that people kind of understand our faith fully, the more support we will have as a church. I'm glad when I see on the internet that we have converts. But it saddens me that kind of people converted themselves. They kind of like did their own research and reviews and kind of like came and then kind of started like tending and learning more of the stuff, as opposed to like us kind of like going out and talking and meeting people one by one. So it's great that people are coming to the church, but I think as a church itself, we can do more with our external evangelization. So it's really, I feel like if we properly evangelize, we properly catechize, and if we pray for that, I think we would definitely get support from the faithful and in more vocations, and support for our current clerics and our clerics that are candidates.
Absolutely. There's 10 of you being ordained in November, right?
Yes. Actually, no, there's 9. One guy got ordained. He had done the program before and came back. So he got ordained already, but he's just finishing up his master's.
I see. You got the special treatment.
Yes, he did. So he got ordained last year with the other group.
Oh, well, I will certainly be keeping him in prayer, as well as the 9 of you still to come. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on to the show and sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.